In the previous assignment, we added 3 new actions we can dispatch, and we do dispatch them in our counter container: decrement, add, and subtract. Now for add and subtract, which we obviously handle in our reducer, it would make sense to also receive a payload, some additional data passed along with the action type. Because right now we hard-coded +10 and -8 into the reducer, but of course in a lot of applications, for example when creating a new blog post, you would get that information from your component, the input the user entered, for example, the ID of the post the user clicked on. You can't hard-code that into your reducer for that reason. So let's also say we don't want to hard-code the value by which we want to add or subtract to the counter or from the counter into the reducer. Instead, we want to get this information along with the action. So we can easily implement this. On our action here, we are just dispatching a JavaScript object, and only the type property is set in stone, so to say. We can obviously add more properties to that object. No one's stopping us from doing that. We can simply add a second property, for example, value, or just v, whatever you want. You can choose any name you want here, and you can of course also add multiple properties. So I'll take value here, though what you also often see is just payload. Payload could then itself be a JavaScript object which holds all the relevant payload to this action. But that's just something you often see. You can also skip the payload and just have a value, and let's say that's 10, and a name, and that's max. So you can add as many properties as you want. Now here I'll add one which I'll name val. Again, the name is up to you. And let's say we always want to add 10. And of course, since we're inside the container, we could easily connect this to some input field we have. Now for subtract, I'll add val, and let's say this is 15. So now I pass the value which I want to add or subtract along with the type. And again, the type property is the only property you have to have where the name is not up to you. Now we can extract that val property in our reducer. So here for add and subtract, I no longer want to add 10 or subtract 8. Instead here in the add if check, I'll simply add action.val. And here the property name, val, is of course the property name I chose here in my counter container in this object I pass in this action, so the object I dispatch, val. And the same of course for subtracting. Here I also simply use action val. So I as a developer of course know what I named this property when I dispatch the action, and I have to retrieve my value or the data which is relevant to me in the reducer from that same property name. Save all the files and get back to the application. Now the labels are wrong here, we're subtracting 15 actually, but let's click the buttons to just see if it works. Let's subtract, and we subtracted 15. And we can add 10 again because we set val to 10 for this button. So let's quickly update the caption on the other button so that it doesn't say subtract 8, but instead that it simply says subtract 15. And now our application is 100% up to date. Now though, and that's important, passing a payload with the action, passing some additional data, and not just passing the type.